Welcome to Beat the Bots: How Writers Thrive in the Age of AI with Jane Cleland. So happy to see you all here on this almost summer weekend. Thank you for spending your time with us today. All right, before I get into the session, I just want to thank this month's sponsor for June. It is Ingram. Probably many of you are familiar with Ingram. They are the biggest book distributor in the world, and also, of course, in the United States. Because they are such a big distributor and wholesaler, they have their own advertising program. If you're interested in advertising your books, they can help you. They have a program called Ingram ID, and they now have AI capabilities built into that tool to help you develop the best performing ads. So if you're interested, particularly in social media advertising, this tool can help with that. And if you would like to learn more, just take a picture of this slide, take a picture of that QR code, and it will take you to the landing page to learn more about their advertising services. So thank you to Ingram. I really appreciate their support. Now, on to today's presenter. I am delighted to have Jane Cleland with me. Jane has published numerous novels. Some of you are already fans of her work, I know, because you've said so in the chat. She's the author of award-winning mysteries, the Josie Prescott Antiques Mystery Series. She's a contributing editor at Writer's Digest magazine. She's written multiple books on the craft, including Mastering Suspense, Structure, and Plot. And I've hosted paid classes with Jane as well. And there'll be some later this year. But today's session is about beating the bots. So I'm going to pass things over to her. And Jane, I won't interrupt unless there is a burning question that we have to answer before you're finished.
Thank you so much. And hello, everyone. Welcome. It is a pleasure to be here. I want to stress right from the get-go that everything I'm going to talk about today is based on science. It is research-based. And I want to clarify science-based and research-based. And among the research I've done is I have spoken to scores of award-winning and best-selling authors in addition to looking at the science behind creativity. And here's what I want to talk about, and here's how it all fits together. What I'm talking about is based on my book coming out in August, Beat the Bots: A Writer's Guide to Surviving and Thriving in the Age of AI, which I work on the thesis that you, the human, are what bring the unique storytelling capability to the table. AI cannot tell your story. It can tell a story, perhaps, and it probably is going to go after the low-hanging fruit. So we have to be better. We have to become more creative. And we do that by harnessing our creativity. I want to talk a little bit about what AI can do and can't from an author's point of view. Then I want to talk about creativity as a process. And then in my book, I've identified a dozen creative techniques. These are tactics based on the science that will help us come up with new ideas specifically related to a dozen elements of the storytelling process. And I'm going to go through one of them today so you see how it works. And then, of course, I will be delighted to open it up to your questions. To beat the bots, you have to bring your creative best to the endeavor. And that means you have to be prepared to do things differently. I mean, think about it. If we did things all just the same way all the time, we would be doing the same things over and over again. Nothing would change. Well, I'm going to talk a little bit about the anatomy of creativity. What I want to do is really focus on us as authors, on how to bring that innovative flair to the table and what stops us from doing it. Let me jump in and tell you something about AI and what it can do. Mystery Writers of America, they're the folks that run the Edgar Awards, the most premier award in the crime fiction world. They have this on their website. The underlyings here are mine. You can't use AI. That's what they're saying. You can use AI as a supportive tool. And I heard Jane mention some of those that had been posted in chat, where for editing, perhaps, and they're even including copy editing, grammar, formatting. But the core elements, the narrative, thematic development, stylistic choices, should reflect the author's unique voice and creative work. And by submitting it, you're confirming it. It is an authentic representation of the author's creative intent and voice. So the first reason not to use AI is you're going to be signing something that says you didn't. And this is going to be true of all publishers. You submit something, I guarantee you it's going through an AI detector. There are many of them. Here's one, Quillbot. Just for the sake of argument, I put in the first several paragraphs of Agatha Christie's The Murderous Affair at Styles. And you see that there is 0% chance this text was generated by AI. So, in other words, don't do it. And if you do it, you're likely to be caught. Paula Monnier, literary agent and mystery author in her own right, she's also written a wonderful memoir and many nonfiction books. But what she says is write a bigger book. I've always said write a better book. You want to get published, write a better book. She says, no, yeah, that used to be true. Now you have to write a better and bigger book. And for that, you have to be more creative. So what I've done is I've linked science-based creative boosting tactics to the storytelling process to help you understand the how of it. It's one thing to know what, but this will help you understand the how. So your story, with your ingenuity and your humanity, it is that empathy, the ability to understand what people do and what they don't do and what they might do, that will bring your story, your unique story, to life. People hesitate. People, in my experience, authors pull their punches. They don't write raw. They go for safe. I'm telling you, think about it a different way. Steer to the pain. Steer to the pain. Steer to the emotional truth. People are hungry for the truth. You know that old saying, if you build a better mousetrap, they'll beat a path to your door? Well, you steer to the emotional truth. They'll beat a path to the bookstore to get your book. There's a Maltese, he was a physician and a commentator who originated the term lateral thinking. His name's Edward de Bono. And here's what he says about creativity. There's no doubt that creativity is the most important human resource of all. Without creativity, there can be no progress, and we'll be forever repeating the same patterns. Something to think about, right? You know, here's another way to think about it. Just as some people are born with a musical ability or great athleticism or an ability to understand math in a superior way, so too are some people born more creative. They just get it. But that doesn't mean that the rest of us, no matter where we are on the spectrum of more or less creative, can't harness that ability, can't develop that skill, can't develop it as a reliable tool in our writing toolbox. So, to do that, we have to quiet our internal critics, and we do that by separating the creative and the assessment process. Part of what we can do better than AI is assess our work, because we can bring our human judgment and discernment to the process, which isn't to say they can't help, but you have to develop both the creative writing skill and the creative assessment skill. And want to talk about both of those as we proceed. But it's a very important tip. Separate creative from assessment. When I said before that, in my experience, too many people pull their punches, they're not writing raw, it's because they're judging themselves as they write. Just write it, let it rip, get it out there. If you don't have anything to edit, you don't have anything to edit. Don't get it right, get it written. Then we can come back and use our creative judgment in deciding what's working and what's not. And notice that I'm not saying what's good and what's not. What is effective? What is appropriate? What's working? That needs to be our matrix. So that brings us to the genesis of creativity. And what I have here are 5 steps that taken together will create I want to use the word environment, but I don't mean it as in a physical place. I mean it in the broadest sense. It will facilitate your being able to do creative work. So let me go through some of these tips. First, allocate 10 minutes for creativity. 10 minutes. You know, this aligns with my 10-minute writing process. I had to develop it when I was transitioning from corporate training into college teaching. And I was getting an MFA because that's considered a terminal degree in the writing business. And I was on, I think, the 6th book in my series at that point, on deadline. And I was an adjunct because I needed to gain experience in order to go for a tenure track job. Can you imagine? Well, what I discovered was that I had 20 minutes between my 3 classes. So I had 20 minutes, then 20 minutes. I could take 10 of those minutes and write a paragraph. So what I did is I would reread the last paragraph I'd written, do a little editing as I was going, write another paragraph. Well, if there's roughly 3 paragraphs on a page, guess what? You do that 3 times a day, you've written a page. Do that for a year, you have a first draft. Now, I'm not recommending that you write your book in 10-minute increments, but you can. And that's my point. It is amazing what you can do in 10 minutes. You want to spend longer on it, that's fine too. But I do recommend, at least when you start, set a timer so that you figure out how the time is being spent, how much time you are devoting to it, whether you are wandering off, whether you stop prematurely, and the like. Remember that creativity is a process. Writing is a process, and we're trying to meld these together so that we are as productive and efficient as possible. So the first tip is allocate time. I recommend 10 minutes. Second is environment, and this is the environment that works for you. Some people write to music. Other people like quiet. Some people like to be in a coffee shop with that kind of white noise, chatter, buzz. Other people want to be outside in a tiki hut. There's no right or wrong. It is you knowing yourself and what facilitates you doing your best work. So for those 10 minutes, get yourself into that environment. One specific thing I will tell you is that being exposed to water and nature has been proven to facilitate creativity. There's a book called, I'm going to come back to the book in a moment, but what I want to tell you right now is about the Japanese Ministry of Agriculture, Forestry, and Fisheries. They created the term, and I don't speak Japanese, so I'm doing this phonetically, Shinrin-yoku, which translates to forest bathing. You may have heard of it. It doesn't really mean taking a bath in the forest. It means immersing yourself in nature. And 10 minutes is, again, the time marker of being mindful, walking slowly, observing, that does something to you, this observing the forest environment. And even if you can't get yourself into nature, maybe you want to put on one of the gazillion YouTube videos of a waterfall or birds chirping. And if it sounds silly to you or, oh, please, kind of lame, try it. Can it do any harm? Experiment. This is how you're going to develop the creative process that will go with your writing process that will help you be as productive as possible. But you've got to try new things, or you're just going to keep doing the same thing. And you know what Einstein said about that, right? To expect a different outcome when doing the same thing, he'd call that a definition of insanity. Certainly, if it didn't work once, but why might it work right now? Attitude, happiness, contentment. I'm telling you, it helps with creativity. Being creative makes you happier. The positive effect of creativity on subjective well-being. It's an article in the National Library of Medicine. The lead author was Chen-Yi Tan, and it starts with this declarative statement. The impact of happiness on creativity is well established. In short, the happier you are, the more creative you're likely to be. Dr. Barr, who's the author of Mind Wandering, that's one of the techniques I talk about in the book, is if you'd like to summon some creative meandering, your best chances are while you're in a good mood. So again, ask yourself, what tools do you have in your personal toolbox? Or what do you want to try, experiment with that might help you find contentment while you're in the writing process? It could be petting a cat. It could be meditation. It could be repeating uplifting phrases, mind speak. You can do it. You're going to come up with a great idea. They've all been shown to support creativity. Your goal, ask yourself a specific question. When you want to be creative, don't just say, all right, I'm ready, as if you're waiting for inspiration. Inspiration, and I don't mean to sound harsh, but inspiration's for amateurs. We professionals get up and go to work. We have to have a prescribed manner in which we can be productive. And one of the ways you do that is by posing a specific question. So very often, this is one of my techniques. I ask myself a question that I need help with just as I go to sleep. You've heard the phrase, you sleep on it. Invariably, I'll wake up with an answer. So whether it's a plot question or a character question or a setting question, have something specific you're trying to be creative about. Logistics. Don't lose track of things. Don't lose track of things. Write them down, record them into your phone. You know, I'm always reminded of George Bernard Shaw, the great playwright, who said he had his best ideas overnight, and one of the agonies of his life was that he would wake up and not remember a thing. And so he put a pad of paper next to his bed, a pencil, and he was, sure enough, woke up, wrote something down, woke up the next morning. Oh, I'm a happy man. What did I write? He eagerly grabbed his pad, and what he wrote was, write play. It's funny, right? So we got to do better than that. We have to write enough so that we don't lose sight of our good ideas. Don't depend on memory, or don't depend only on memory. Make sure that you track it. That's the logistics. Creativity is a beautiful thing. And part of the beauty is that you just never know what's around the corner when you're heading on down that road. So that brings us to one of the tactics that I think is most effective, conceptual blending. And I associate this one with settings. Of course, we can use it in many other ways, but in the book and right now, what I do with it is I use it to develop settings that inspire reader curiosity. And I need to make an important point, and that is that I think writers don't pay adequate attention to setting. I think that we want to do better. We want to have create immersive experiences where our readers really want to be there and feel as if they are there. And to do that, we have to come up with an appropriate milieu. The term milieu refers to much more than time and place. It's the physicality, yes, but it's also the social setting in which something occurs, in which your people are interacting. And the way that we can delve into it and harness it is to go back to our characters and figure out how they feel about the place. What do they observe? What do they miss? My niece, Marcy, who's a brilliant social psychologist, the University of Texas, Austin, we were just talking, and she made this statement: people see what they expect to see. Think about that. People see what they expect to see. This is one of the reasons we can't trust eyewitness testimony. But I took it as a broader statement because now think about it in setting. And it's such a perfect, really, it's foreshadowing for the example I'm going to give you. And I hadn't really made the connection. People see what they expect to see. So I did, as I told you, an enormous amount of research. And I asked a chatbot for how Police Commissioner Reagan felt about New York. And he, of course, was the star of Blue Bloods for a gazillion years. It offered only general commentary about New York and the commissioner, and then warned me that it might not be accurate because of its time-based cutoff. Knowledge cutoff is what it's called. Knowledge cutoff. That's not helpful. I know about New York. I sort of know the character, but I don't know how he feels about New York, really. And here's the bottom line on what that means to all of us when it comes to creating relevant settings. Don't ask a chatbot, ask your character. So milieu includes everything you can think of that makes one place distinctive from another. Certainly language, whether that's a dialect, whether it's multiple languages that either work together or don't. It could be a patois. It could be secret love language. Everything to do with language. Food. Food is so important. And certain regions, of course, are known for certain foods. But what does your character like to eat? What's in their refrigerator? What do they cook or do they not cook? And if they don't cook, why not? It is such a primal need. What is their attitude towards food? I had a cousin named Betty who once told me there's two kinds of people in the world: people who live to eat and people who eat to live. So that's something to think about, right? She was very thin. She was an eat to live kind of gal. She also had a pink miniature poodle. Uh, did you know that there's a pickle festival in Jackson, Mississippi, and Mount Olive, North Carolina? Mount Olive, that's the brand that you see in many grocery stores. There are lots of sandcastle building competitions, Florida, Texas, several locations in each, and in New Hampshire. What is the local community event? Uh, in many hotter environments like Florida, you see sailboats decorated for Christmas, and the Christmas parade is boats. How do people feel about that? Do they like music? Do they not like music? What is their attitude towards music? Are there certain styles of music that are more popular, known for the area? And think about all the urban myths, all the small town witchcraft and that used to be around. But there's a place in the Bahamas called Small Hope Bay. There's actually a lodge there, Small Hope Bay Lodge. I got curious about the name, Small Hope Bay. It turns out that local lore has it that pirates buried their treasures in the bay, and there's small hope anyone will find it because they haven't so far. It informs the milieu. And of course, we could go on and on and on. But let me show you how this works by going through my conceptual blending chart. So you're going to choose two protagonists, two characters, one your protagonist and one another person. It could be, if you're writing crime fiction, it could be that you choose your detective and the antagonist, the killer. And it could be, if it's a romance, it could be the man and the woman, if that's the kind of romance you're writing. If you're writing a fantasy, it could be two of the fantastical characters that are at odds to one another, with one another. If it's a literary novel, perhaps you have someone who's struggling to overcome addiction, and that's the protagonist. And the second character, you could choose a drug dealer, a rehab counselor, a drug buddy. It doesn't matter. What matters is that you choose someone who is in the same place at the same time, interacting. We want them to be interacting together. So then there's a three-step process. I have a series of questions, then you'll write it up, and then you assess your work. You notice how we're quieting our internal critic by reassuring them that they'll have their day when it's time to assess. But of course, we don't let them just say, oh, that's terrible. We have very specific questions for them to consider because we want to harness their smart editorial eye. We don't want them to diminish our confidence, our self-confidence in ourselves as writers. So for example, there are 13 questions actually. And here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go through an example. And I'm writing a literary novel here about a young woman struggling to break free from family expectations and live the life she chooses. Tessa, in her 20s, is home with good news as she's earned her doctoral degree. Tessa's mother, Alice, is in her 50s. She works at a big box retailer. Alice is mistrustful of higher education since the so-called elites just end up lording over everyone else, thinking they know what's best. So for question number one, it's set in 1990. Tessa is 26. Alice is 53. It's set in Nantasket Beach. Tessa says, where I grew up. Alice says, Nantasket Beach, the armpit of the South Shore. This is a beach community south of Boston. Summarize the setting's geography. Our family home is a few blocks from the beach. The sand is tan, the beach rocky, the ocean almost always dark. We're also a few blocks from the bay where the water is warmer and calmer. Nantasket is flat until you reach Strawberry Hill. The views from the top are super. And Tessa says, an ugly beach, dangerous ocean, flat, dirty, dull. The rich folk live on Strawberry Hill. And I think you can see how this goes on to, as we ask questions, their personalities, how they feel about the place. They're just diverging, two separate forks, same place. They have such different perceptions. And it goes on with anything that is of interest to them. And here's where I ended up. And as I was writing, I was thinking of Doctorow's great quote, Good writing is supposed to evoke sensation in the reader, not the fact that it's raining, but the feeling of being rained upon. Beautiful, right? So here's my two. Roller coaster, I screamed, even though I was alone in the old Chevy. Hollering roller coaster as soon as you saw the old wooden monstrosity was a long-standing tradition, and here I am shouting it, even though the roller coaster's long gone. When I was a girl, the first person who spotted it on the drive from Boston to Nantasket won. Later, I realized there was no prize. It was just Mama's way of keeping us busy. Nantasket Beach came into view, the sand more beige than white, ribbons of slimy green seaweed tangled with driftwood and rocks. White cabs bobbed along the ocean's surface. Pewter clouds blew in from the north, bringing in a cold rain and lots of it. I loved a good storm. I rolled to a stop in front of my old house, the cottage where I'd been born, the house where Grandma had baked bread every afternoon, the house that Mama somehow had made into a home. I pushed open the screen door. Mama never locked the door. Mama, I called. I'm home. Here's Alice. Alice wheeled her shopping cart up F Street through the punishing rain. The rickety shack, her home, came into view, paint peeling, the side gutter dangling. Damn place was still standing. Maybe this storm would finally do the dump in and she could escape. Different. Because having gone through the conceptual blending creativity tactic, I got a clear understanding of how their feelings about the place diverged, and I could write about the setting informed by the characters, not imposing it on them, but letting them develop it. That's going to be unique. That's creative because it comes from a fresh set of eyes, my character's eyes. But now, how do I know if it's likely to work? Well, let's go back to those characters. You asked, did you learn anything about the characters or the setting? Assess it objectively. Is it vivid? And when you think about some of the things I said in terms of the slimy seaweed and the white caps bobbing, punishing rain, I think it's pretty vivid. Mood consistent. Have I added insights? Have I moved the plot forward? Remember, only you, the author, can know how your characters feel, and it is from those feelings that your story springs to life. Any ideas generated by AI will be derivative and generic. I want to leave you with a final thought, and then I'll be pleased to answer your questions. There's the sensory descriptors. And that is that you are innately creative. I guarantee it. Never tell them you had to learn to write. Let them think you were born this way. It's from Hemingway. And now it would be my pleasure to answer your questions.
Thank you so much, Jane. So I'm going to start with what I consider a pretty challenging question, so forgive me. It's from an anonymous attendee who's asking if creativity can be learned, then why will AI not learn creativity? And then the second part to this question from the same person is most popular books are formulas and are not that creative, honestly. Should we let AI write those?
I'm going to answer the second part first. I do think AI is going to pretty soon replicate the most formulaic books. I call those the low-hanging fruit, right? I think that's, call it 5 to 10 years. I don't think it's going to be sooner because if you read books that have been generated by AI now,
Mm,
and I did, or at least I
yeah.
tried, I started some. We talked about this earlier, Jane, you did too.
Yes.
They're terrible. They are banal, they are generic, they have no energy, they are they're just not interesting.
Yeah.
Do I think that AI can learn to replace people in that creative function? And I am not going to say no because A, who knows? And B, you're right. If creativity can be learned, why can't it do that? Can it learn a new voice? Oh, that's a whole different animal, right? And I'm actually just going to, I keep it handy because I think about it so often. And I want to read you something that is from Rochelle Gardner, um, who is a literary agent. Okay, it would help if let me try this again. There we go. So I want to read you what she says about voice. And this is where I think AI is not going to be able to replicate us. Your writer's voice is the expression of you on the page. It's that simple and that complicated. Your voice is all about honesty. It's the unfettered, non derivative, unique conglomeration of your thoughts, feelings, passions, dreams, beliefs, fears, and attitudes coming through in every word you write. It's a process of peeling away the layers of your false self. You're trying to be something you're not self, your copycat self. You're trying to sound a certain way self. You're spent my life watching television self. If it's unique to each of us, no one can do it but us.
I thought I'd share in the chat right now, for those who are curious and haven't seen what a wholly AI generated novel looks like as of today. I think it's worth taking a look. So I'm just going to put this link into the chat. It is an Amazon link because that's where the books are being published and distributed. Um, this is an author who, it could be a collection of people, I don't know, but it's definitely a pen name. The pen name is Cindo Hain. And so if you click on the link in the chat, you will go to Amazon and kind of see all of the books that have been published under that name. It's about 150 titles over the past 6 weeks. And if you click on read sample, you can read, basically the first chapter or so. And my conclusion from reading this is, I think the same as yours, Jane, is that AI is not anywhere near yet being by itself being capable of generating a novel that anyone actually wants to read. It's really torturous, in fact, to read some of these Sindohane generated books. It's just wow. But I do know that there are plenty of human authors out there who are using AI in a more collaborative fashion, and I'm not sure if you would be able to tell how much they used AI or not. But I just wanted to put that into the chat because I don't know that people are cognizant of how much this is already in the marketplace. And in the spirit of helping you see what AI writing looks like on its own without human involvement, I think you need to see it. Everyone needs to see it so you understand and can maybe spot it better yourself. Okay. So that question I just asked, there was a follow-up question in the chat from Jean, wondering if there's going to be a huge role in the future for trusted curators to help us effectively sort through what she's probably predicting will be like this flood of AI content, like the Cindo Hain novels, 150 in a month or so. What do you think about that?
I'm not really sure I understand the question about, I don't understand the question.
So my interpretation of the question is if AI leads to a lot more noise in the marketplace, or if AI leads to a lot more, let's say, low quality work, even from human authors, are we going to depend more on having other human beings tell us
Well,
this is really what you should pay attention to?
haven't hasn't there always been reviewers that that's their job and word of mouth? It is why we authors spend a lot of time on tour to meet people, to introduce them to our work so that hopefully they will like it and embrace it and mention it to other people who will like our work and booksellers. Those are the three, right? Reviewers, individual word of mouth, booksellers, and librarians. Those are the curators.
Here's a question from Ellen. She asks, what do you suggest when the environment is a place the protagonist doesn't want to be? How do you create setting then where the reader wants to be?
Well, that's interesting. First of all, I'd want to know why she didn't want to be there. Let's say it's an idyllic vacation resort somewhere, the kind of place where there are drinks served with little umbrellas and the meals are great and so on. But the last time she went to a place like this, not this place, but a place like this, she was raped. And she didn't expect it to translate to another resort. She thought she would just never go back there again. Um, I think that would be pretty easy to make that distinction because she would be saying things like, oh, the sun is too hot. And other people around her would say, oh, just I work on solar energy. Hello, it's beautiful. And we would see both sides and get a better picture.
Here's a question from Sarah, or maybe it's more of a comment. Sarah says, I think the example of setting is one where AI can be a productive creator partner to learn about a place from different perspectives. So AI can inhibit another POV and help push you to think differently. This is not writing for the writer at all, just sharing, suggesting various POVs that can inspire creativity. Do you have
Yeah,
any?
that I think, no, I think that's right. Although, in my book, I asked authors for pro tips, like what would you recommend about this issue? And Jonathan Santlifer is the author who responded for setting. And he, I'm thinking specifically of his book, The Lost Van Gogh, um, which is written over two timelines in the 1800s, where the Van Gogh was lost, and then current day, where it's found, and how those stories intersect. Masterful manipulation of timelines. Takes place in multiple locations throughout Europe and in the States. And he says that you cannot, in his experience, you have to go there. That he used New York as an example. He had examples from Italy as well, but I liked his New York example about how noisy it is, New York City. But it's noisy in different ways based on the neighborhood. And unless you're there smelling the smells of the this kind of food versus that kind of food in that kind of neighborhood and listening to the cacophony, you're not going to be able to replicate that immersive experience. Which isn't to say that AI can't be a great partner in helping you know some things to think about, know some things to go look at, help you understand the nuance of those things or the meaning of those things. Um, but you have to ask very specific questions, I would say, in order to get back feedback that will be helpful.
So Ellen has a question about the blending exercise that you had. She says, given the blending exercise, how did you then use it in the book? She asked, does Jane bounce back and forth between perspectives or intertwine them? Can you comment more?
Yes, certainly. That actually was a case study that I wrote for this book. It is not in a novel that I wrote. But you will notice that I wrote Tessa's chapters from the first person. It was I was in my car alone, and Alice from the third person. And I did that on purpose because I wanted the reader to create a sense of intimacy with Tessa and have a arm's length distance relationship with Alice. But I do have a chapter in there on point of view and how you make those decisions. And this is this requires your human understanding of how you want your readers to feel. I mean, there are books written in the second person, rare, hard to do, but it creates a very interesting, wide lens point of view.
Okay, last question, unless some trickle in as we get toward the end here. Um, Heather is wondering how she might use AI to assist in medical research without replicating the embedded biases, especially sexism and racism. She says, my hybrid memoir exposes sexism and racism in women's healthcare and research. I have my own take on this, but I'm going to let you give your thoughts first.
Okay, yes, I look forward to hearing your response. I'm certainly not an expert on medical research, but I will tell you that AI I mean, they call it hallucinations. It's wrong a lot, and that is not getting better in my experience. It makes astonishing mistakes. Just one, I asked it to write a new episode of Law and Order SVU, and it was so bad. I mean, it was so bad, but worse to me than the fact that it was a girl is missing. We must find her and give the family closure. I mean, when I say bad, it was bad. They referred to this was a conversation between Benson and Stabler, and they were both detectives. Stabler hasn't been on the show in 10 years, or more than 10 years, and she's now, I think, a captain. So it's like, it's just wrong. And it's bad.
Yes. Um, so I find these questions really challenging to answer because so much depends on which tool you're using, when you were using it, how you prompted it, if it's remembering your past conversations, which again will depend on the version and what your settings are like. So I find that it's getting more and more challenging to have a straightforward answer to this sort of issue. So I will say, just based on my own experiences, especially when I wasn't paying for these tools, when I was just using the openly free versions, whether that was OpenAI's ChatGPT or Claude or something like that. Um, Lots of hallucinations, lots of things that you absolutely could not rely on what it was telling you. But neither in those cases would I say I was using it for factual information. Recently, I decided to pay for the business plan of ChatGPT, which allows you to use a function called deep research. And for those who know about the model Perplexity, Perplexity is something that uses citations. So it's using real-time information gathering on the web elsewhere because it has licensing agreements with certain publishers. So it's using real-time gathering, information gathering to help answer whatever your question or prompt is. So if avoiding hallucinations is important, and if you want the citations, you have to make sure you're using the right tool for the job. But even then, of course, there's always going to be room for errors to creep in, and you have to be super aware of that. And I think the more you use the tools, the more you hone your skepticism or your ability to pinpoint when it's really going off the rails. So now that brings me to the racism and sexism question. So it really depends, I think, again, on the model, the history of your use, and if you're using it for something that has the citations or the real-time capabilities, because then hopefully if you're doing some research, you have some sense of what are the biases of the citations it's pulling in, what is it not pulling in. So this is where I think in order to know how good the AI is, you yourself in some regard have to be a little bit of an expert, or like at least know enough to understand if it's taking you off into a direction that is harmful. So I know that's not like a straightforward solution, but the more you work with the models and read also criticism of them, I think the better you can get at navigating this. And the last piece of advice I would offer for just pragmatically, make sure that you yourself ask the chatbot after you get whatever the response is, ask it to criticize its own response. Ask it, is there any, can you identify any sexism or bias in the information you just presented me? So ask it to challenge,
Mhm.
and it will. And sometimes you can get a fuller understanding that way.
I'd like to make two additional comments. Number one, in listening to you just now, it reminds me about the difference between fiction and nonfiction.
Yeah.
In fiction, I always aim for, and remember in my mystery series, I used facts to write fiction, but I aim for credibility and plausibility. I do not aim for 100% accuracy because I'm writing fiction. And as an example, Lee Child says in one of the Jack Reacher thriller books, he has Jack Reacher going down the West Side Highway in New York and turning left on Houston. There is no left turn off the West Side Highway onto Houston. And when asked about it, he said, "Well, I didn't want to get involved in, the little curvy streets of Greenwich Village, and it's not a logistical book. I just wanted to get him onto Houston fast." So I said, "What the hey?" And off he went. I love that. And it really informed me. It made me think in a new way
Mm.
about this idea of accuracy versus credibility versus plausibility.
Yeah.
That's different than medical research. And
Yeah.
perhaps if it were pure nonfiction, but that's my second comment, is that I just wanted to comment about memoirs. I use memoir as a case study in mastering suspense, structure, and plot. And that is that memory. I mean, my mother bought a condo in Florida on her American Express card. She flew down and she bought it. And my brother tells me I am dead wrong. It did not happen that way.
Mm.
And I really thought about it. Everybody else involved is no longer with us. And I decided to go with my version because why should I trust his memory more than mine? Yeah.
Denise wonders, now that we've gotten into the weeds here, uh, while AI tries to provide diverse POVs, what are your thoughts on POV and AI? Because multiple points of view requires skill. There's an exclamation point there, skill. It does.
It does. Absolutely. Well, I'm not sure what asking. There's just so many considerations that you have to go through and in choosing a point of view and then in executing it well. Um, and I would not ask AI to make that decision for me. I mean, they're going to give you generic information. They're going to tell you that third person limited is the most commonly used in this, and that if you want in a detective novel, an amateur detective, you need first person because your readers can only see what the detective's seeing at that moment. And so they can tell you that, but it requires discernment for you to decide what's best for your
Yeah.
story.
Yeah. Yeah. That's really key. Okay.
Yes.
We've come to the end here. Jane, thank you so much for presenting what I hope is encouraging and inspiring information for those who are feeling a little bit anxious about where technology is taking us. Would you remind me, when is your book coming out? It's
August
shortly.
August 12th.
And I also wanted to mention to folks, for those who are looking for pragmatic guidance on AI, I am offering a class later this month about using it mainly for business tasks, not necessarily for writing tasks. So for those of you who have like the POV questions with AI, I'm not going to help you with that part. But I have been using AI a lot in my own business, like to help with marketing, functions, administration, back end, website development. That's been a real surprise for me. Um, so I'll just, for those who are looking for the pragmatic side of AI, not so much for the writing, but the business, I've put that link into the chat as well. All right, Jane, thank you again. And thank you all for coming today. And I hope to see you at another free session again. The next one will be next month at the end of July. It's going to be about what happens when your piece goes viral, the pros and the cons, and the things you never expected.
Sounds great. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks. Have a great weekend.